To be honest with you, sir, visiting hours for the retirement kennels ended at noon. This isn't really the place for drop-ins. Monroe McDermott didn't answer right away. He finished reading the gate. Posts to latch, low to high, the unhurried sweep of a man checking something he couldn't help checking, and then his eyes settled on the young man with the tablet. Thomas Nyberg had already returned to his screen. Behind him, 50 feet back in the exercise yard, a Belgian Malinois lay on his side in the thin afternoon light. He hadn't moved for a visitor in 2 years. Staff had stopped expecting it, but something changed in the dog's body. Not a sound, just a slow lift of the long, dark muzzle, up and toward the gate, the way a compass needle swings, without being asked. Monroe's left hand found the pipe in his breast pocket and turned it once. He waited. "I'll wait," Monroe said. That was all. No argument, no explanation, no request to speak with someone in charge. He said it, the way a man says it, when he has already made peace with the possibility that waiting is all he'll get. Nyberg gave him a brief practice nod, the kind that closes a transaction, then turned and made his way back to the main building, tablet tucked under one arm, already scrolling with the other hand. He did not look back. Monroe did not watch him go. He turned instead to face the gate, not through it, at it. His eyes moved low to high, along the left post, paused at the latch housing, tracked up to the crossbar, came to rest on nothing in particular somewhere just above the top rail. Anyone watching would have said he was staring at nothing. Anyone who knew what that particular pattern of looking meant would have moved one step to the left without being told. He had done it for so long it no longer felt like a habit. It just felt like seeing. His left hand came up from his side and found the breast pocket on its own. The pipe came out between 2 fingers. A small thing, a briar bowl worn to deep amber at the crown. The stem dark from years of handling rather than years of smoke. His thumb found the smooth place on the bowl without having to search for it. It was always in the same place. His thumb had worn it there. He turned it once, set it against his palm, turned it back. Across the yard, 50 feet from where he stood, a Belgian Malinois lay in the back left corner of the exercise pen with its chin on its forepaws. It had not moved. Monroe had not looked directly at the dog. He would not yet. That was its own kind of discipline. The cold worked through his flannel. He had rolled the sleeves before getting out of the truck, same as always, and he did not roll them down now. The cold was information, and he had learned long ago not to muffle information. The truck sat in the parking lot behind him, engine off, keys on the dash. He had sat in that truck for 22 minutes before getting out. If you had watched from the right angle, you would have seen his left hand moving the whole time, thumb crossing the bowl of the pipe, back and forth, the motion so small and constant it looked like breathing. This was not the first time he had parked in that lot. He had come 11 times. He knew the number. He had not gone back and counted. He had just always known. The first time was 8 days after the discharge paperwork cleared. He pulled in, found a space near the tree line, and sat for 40 minutes. Then he drove home. The second time he got as far as the gate. The third time he sat for an hour and 15 minutes and did not get out of the truck at all. 11 times in 2 years. Not once had he come through the gate. There was a reason for that. He had not told it to anyone. It sat in him the way certain things do. Not as a wound exactly, more as a weight. You stop noticing until something shifts and you feel all of it at once. He turned the pipe again. The Malinois in the exercise yard had not moved. But Monroe, without looking directly at it, had registered everything. The angle of the head, the particular set of the shoulders, the way the ears had lifted 3 degrees from Platt when he'd spoken 2 words through the chain link to a stranger who didn't deserve them. 2 words, barely a sound, and something across that yard had heard them anyway. Clifford Petway had been filling the outdoor water stations when the old men arrived. He noticed him, the way you notice a deer. Ending in a field, not because the deer is moving, but because everything about it suggests it could and chose not to. Petway set down his bucket. The man at the gate wasn't doing anything Nyberg would have flagged. He wasn't arguing, wasn't pacing. He'd said his piece, taken his answer, and now he was simply there. Weight settled evenly on both feet, one hand in the pocket of that faded flannel, the other turning something small and dark at his side. A pipe, looked like. Unlit. The motion of it was automatic, the way a man's breathing is automatic, the kind of thing the body does when the mind is working on something else entirely. Petway watched him scan the perimeter, low to high, left to right, post to post along the chain link, then the gap where it met the corner brace, then the drainage grate, half buried in the grass along the south wall, then back across to the gate mechanism itself. It took maybe 4 seconds total. The man's eyes moved the way a level moves, smooth, deliberate, never rushing the bubble. Petway recognized that sweep. He'd done that sweep himself, once upon a time. Not here, in narrower places, in places that don't get written down by anyone with a comfortable chair. The low to high read the instinctive cataloging of every opening and every shadow behind it. You learn that in environments where the shape of a threshold tells you whether something is waiting inside it, and you don't unlearn it. Not ever. It becomes the first thing your eyes do in any new space, the way some people read exit signs and some people read menus and some people, a very specific kind of people, read what the ground is doing around every opening they pass through. He had not seen anyone else at this facility do that. Not in 3 years of weekend volunteering. Petway didn't approach. Not yet. He picked his bucket back up and moved to the next water station, keeping the man in his peripheral vision the way you keep a compass bearing, not staring at it, just checking. The Belgian Malinois in the far run had lifted its head. That alone was worth noting. The staff had a private name for the dog's condition. Checked out, they called it, in the careful language of people who work with trauma and won't say trauma out loud. 2 years of going through the motions. Eating when fed, moving when asked, not biting anyone. But nothing behind the eyes. No interest in the yard, in the volunteers, in the other dogs moving along the opposite boundary wire. Just a kind of patient waiting that looked like peace if you didn't know what you were looking at. Petway knew what he was looking at. He watched the dog's nose work, slow, deliberate testing of whatever the October wind was carrying from the gate. Not alarm, not aggression, something quieter and more careful than either of those things. The old man at the gate turned the pipe over once more and then went completely motionless. Not the motionless quiet of someone bored or tired or resigned to waiting. The composed, braced quiet of someone who knows exactly what is happening and understands with every year of experience they carry that the wrong move right now ends it. He had not looked at the dog yet. Not directly. Petway set down his bucket a second time. Slower. Now. He was thinking about the scan. About the hands. About the way a man who reads the mouths of underground spaces stands when he finally arrives somewhere he has been deciding whether to go for a very long time. He had questions. He would let them keep a little longer. To be honest with you, sir, I've already explained the visiting hours situation. Nyberg was back. Different angle this time. Coming around the corner of the intake building with a tablet against his chest, walking with the unhurried authority of someone who has never once doubted that the person they are addressing will eventually comply. Monroe turned from the chain link, just his head, the rest of him unhurried. The dog you're asking about, Nyberg said, pulling up something on the screen, scrolling with one thumb, is flagged in our system as a high-sensitivity recovery case. Behavioral instability around unfamiliar adults. Aggression markers in his intake assessment. He glanced up. To be honest with you, unscheduled contact with that animal isn't something we can allow. It's a liability issue. More than anything, Monroe said. Which one is he? Nyberg blinked. Excuse me? In the yard. Monroe's eyes moved back to the exercise area. Which one? It was not a question that admitted the conversation Nyberg was trying to have. The younger man opened his mouth, closed it, and then pointed, unnecessarily, because Monroe had already found him. Chaos was in the back corner of the yard. A Belgian Malinois going gray at the muzzle, ribs not prominent, but visible at the right angle, the kind of lean that comes from years of high-output work and a body that never fully accepted retirement. He had been lying flat when Nyberg walked over. Now he was not lying flat. He was up on his front legs, nose lifted, ears forward at an angle, with no connection whatsoever to the facility staff moving near the building. Nyberg did not notice. The animal has shown zero positive socialization response to any adult visitor since intake, he said, dropping back into the performance review tone. We've had trainers, handlers, former first responders. He tolerates them. He doesn't engage. Our behavioral consultant says forced interaction. At this stage, could set back. Monroe said, he's got his nose up. I'm sorry, your dog. Monroe did not look away from the yard. He's been working his nose toward this gate since you started talking. Nyberg looked. Chaos was angled now, not facing the gate directly, not performing awareness for anyone observing him, but quartered toward it, weight distributed forward, the body language of something that has picked up a thread and has not decided yet what to do about it. He does that sometimes, Nyberg said. Wind behavior, probably. Our consultant noted it in the winds coming from the south. Monroe's voice was the same as it had been all afternoon. Flat, patient, not arguing, gates east. Nyberg looked at his tablet as if it had a response to that. Monroe turned the pipe in his left hand, one rotation, set his thumb in the worn groove at the bowl where the amber had gone deep from 10,000 identical moments. He was not looking at Nyberg anymore. He was watching chaos the way a man watches something he already understands. Quietly, without needing it to perform. I'm not asking to go in the yard, Monroe said. I'll stand right here. Sir, the protocol, I'll stand right here, Monroe said again, exactly the same. It was not a negotiation. It was not a demand. It was a man stating the next hour of his life, in a voice that had stated harder things in places that had much higher stakes for disagreement. Nyberg exhaled, tapped something on his tablet. I'm noting this conversation, he said. For the record, Monroe nodded once. Across the yard, chaos had not lain back down. He was facing the gate now, not performing it, not barking, not doing anything a behavioral consultant could flag, just facing it, nose working, ears forward, the unhurried attention of an animal that recognizes something it thought was gone and has not yet figured out what to do with that information. Clifford Petway, 15 feet away with his bucket on the ground, watched and said nothing at all. To be honest with you, Nyberg said, not looking up from his tablet, I'm going to have to ask you to move your vehicle from the main lot. We keep those spaces for families with scheduled appointments. Monroe turned the pipe once in his left hand, set his eyes on the back fence line, turned it again. A staff member came through the side door of the main kennel building, a woman in her 30s, with a facility lanyard and the particular hurried walk of someone who had been sent to back someone else up. She positioned herself beside Nyberg with the practiced neutrality of HR training, and said that they had a protocol for this kind of situation, that unscheduled contact with the retirement animals was strongly discouraged, that she was sure he understood. Monroe understood. He had spent 22 years understanding rules that existed to protect things that couldn't protect themselves. He did not say that. He said, "Yes, ma'am," in the tone of a man who has confirmed a grid coordinate. Nyberg glanced at the woman and then at Monroe. With the particular confidence of someone who has just been joined by reinforcements, he straightened. Look, I get it. These animals are impressive, and people develop attachments from a distance, from photos, online, whatever. But chaos has a documented anxiety response to unannounced contact. We've had real setbacks from well-meaning visitors who just showed up. To be honest with you, sir, the kindest thing you can do for that dog is let us do our jobs. He wasn't wrong about the dog. That was the hard part. Monroe kept his eyes on the yard. Chaos had not moved from the gate-facing posture. Nose still working the air, quartering left and right in a pattern so small and habitual, the staff woman hadn't noticed it. But Monroe noticed. He'd watched that nose work for 4 deployments in conditions that would make this green Midwestern afternoon look like a picnic. The pipe turned in his fingers, bowl to stem, stem to bowl. Then he heard it. Not loud, not close. A woman's voice from somewhere beyond the back fence, past the drainage ditch, and the overgrown municipal land, threading through the noise of the facility's ventilation units and the ambient traffic from the road. The kind of sound that starts as calling a name and ends as something else. Monroe's eyes moved to the back boundary before his head did. Long habit. The low-to-high sweep across the back fence line found the drainage grate in the lower left corner of the property. In under a second, a heavy municipal culvert outlet, half obscured by dead weeds, and a rusted utility gate set into the concrete retaining wall where the facility's land dropped off toward the municipal green space. Nyberg was still talking. And frankly, the liability question alone is something our director has been very clear about. So if you want to schedule something formal through the main office, I can give you the email. Monroe wasn't listening to Nyberg anymore. He was listening to the green space. The voice came again. Louder this time? The distance hadn't changed, but the register had. That shift from calling to searching, from searching to the edge of something a parent's voice does, when the math of time starts not adding up. Clifford Petway had gone quiet on the far side of the yard. His bucket was on the ground. Chaos turned from the gate line. A single deliberate pivot, smooth at the shoulder, and now the dog's nose was angled toward the back fence. Ears full forward, body weight distributed forward, over the front feet. Not alarm, not fear, the old working posture, automatic, muscular, 22 years deep in both of them. Monroe took his hand off the gatepost. Nyberg said so. Monroe said, "There's a child in that drainage system, not loud. Not urgent in the way that panics people. Pride. Just the particular flatness of a man stating a target coordinate when there is no longer any time to be polite about it." Nyberg was already drawing breath to answer when the shout came again, closer this time, and unmistakably a child's name, a mother's voice, the kind that strips all performance out of a person. He stopped, looked toward the back fence, then back at Monroe. "To be honest with you, we have a procedure for..." Monroe was already walking. Not fast. Not the scramble of someone in a panic. The measured, deliberate pace of a man who has already done the math and knows that running changes nothing about the distance. He moved through the exercise yard gate the way he moved through every threshold. Half a second at the gap, eyes sweeping low to high, then through the pipe, disappeared into his breast pocket. His hands were free. Chaos hit the interior fence line at the same moment Monroe reached it. Not barking, not frantic. The dog moved with a focused, contained intensity body, low. Nose working the air, amber eyes locked on Monroe's face. 2 years of whatever passed for waiting. It didn't look like waiting anymore. Sir Nyberg was half-jogging now, tablet under one arm. "Sir, you cannot be in the exercise yard without an authorized handler present. The liability alone." Clifford Petway was already at the back gate with a key ring in his hand. At stir, across the facility boundary, maybe 80 meters through the scrub grass and rusted chain link, a woman was on her knees at the edge of the drainage easement. A man in a jacket was crouched beside her, phone pressed to his ear. The parent sounds. You learn to recognize them. The difference between the voice of someone who doesn't know yet and the voice of someone who does. Those sounds were getting worse. Petway got the back gate open. He looked at Monroe, looked at the dog still tracking Monroe's movement through the fence, and made his decision in about a half second. "Doors open," he said. Monroe put his hand on the kennel latch. "Absolutely not." Nyberg stepped in front of it, not aggressive, genuinely procedural, genuinely certain. The tablet was in both hands now. "I understand you think this is urgent, but Chaos has an active instability flag. He has not responded positively to any unknown handler in 2 years, and if that dog bites someone out there, we are looking at." Monroe reached into his shirt, not his pocket, but the chest, where the flannel hung loose over the breast pocket, and drew out a coin. Worn brass about the size of a $50, thick enough to have weight. He held it out to Petway without looking away from the kennel. Petway took it, turned it in the pale afternoon light. His mouth moved once without sound. He looked up. "Where did you get this?" "Earned it," Monroe said. Petway turned it again. On the back, a unit insignia, not a famous one, not the kind that gets embroidered on ball caps. The kind that means something specific to a very small number of people who have never described their work at a dinner table. Petway's voice dropped to almost nothing. That coin means he went places that don't exist in any record you'll ever read. He wasn't talking to Monroe. He was talking to Nyberg, who was still mid-sentence about liability, who hadn't finished the word he was saying when Petway's voice cut under it. Let him work. Nyberg's mouth was still open. At the fence line, Chaos made a sound. Low, single, certain, not a bark. An announcement. Monroe lifted the latch. The dog came through the gate door without hesitation, circled Monroe once with his nose working in tight, efficient passes, and then oriented southeast toward the drainage easement. Not wandering, not casting, pointing. Monroe looked at Petway. Petway gave a single nod. They moved. Monroe reached the kennel gate ahead of everyone. He didn't break stride to get there. He just moved with an economy that made the 10 feet look like 3. And his right hand was already out toward Petway before Petway had fully closed the distance. Not a greeting, not a handshake. A coin. Petway caught it in his palm, the way you catch something you weren't expecting but know immediately has weight. He turned it once. The light was going flat and gray out here in the late afternoon, but the insignia cut through it the way engraved metal does. Sharp edges, worn center, the kind of thing that gets carried for decades in a pants pocket or a breast pocket or pressed into someone else's hand at the end of a thing that didn't have a name. Petway read it without speaking. His thumb moved across the face of it once. Then his chin came up. Thomas Nyberg was 4 steps behind them, tablet open, voice still finding its objection. Something about protocol, something about the dog's documented response thresholds, something that had started before Petway caught the coin and was still technically ongoing. And I want to be clear that we have an established response procedure. And to be honest with you, it does not involve. Petway said it quietly. He wasn't trying to make a moment of it. He was just saying a fact to the air in front of him, the way a man confirms a number. He wasn't sure he'd remembered correctly. He named the unit. 8 words, a designation, a numbering, nothing that would mean anything to someone who hadn't served, or hadn't served in the right places, or hadn't ever sat in a briefing room watching people walk out knowing some of them weren't walking back. Then Petway said, just as quietly, that coin means he went places that don't exist in any record you'll ever read. Nyberg stopped talking. Not gradually, not mid-sentence trailing off. He just stopped. The way a circuit stops when you pull the one wire that mattered. He looked at the coin in Petway's hand. He looked at Monroe, already at the gate, already reading the gap in the fence line where the back boundary met the municipal green space, eyes moving low to high the way they always moved. Monroe had the gate latch in his hand and was waiting. Not impatiently, not urgently, just waiting the half second it took for someone to open the thing. And then, from 50 feet away across the exercise yard, Chaos moved. Not a trot, not the cautious, reluctant approach the staff had documented. Every time a stranger entered the yard, a purposeful line, head up, ears forward, body reading something in the air at the fence that 2 years of separation hadn't erased. 2 years. The dog moved like it was 2 minutes. One of the staff members made a small sound, not a word, just the involuntary noise a person makes when something happens that rewrites what they thought they knew. Nyberg watched it. His tablet was still open in his hands, but he wasn't looking at it. Monroe didn't watch the dog come. He was already looking past the fence into the green space, reading the drainage slope, reading the tree line, reading the way water moved across that ground in the pattern that told the man where the culverts ran below. His free hand turned the briar pipe once, the thumb finding the worn bowl by memory, not intention. And then he pocketed it. Petway opened the gate. Monroe stepped through it, the way he stepped through every threshold half a second. Eyes low to high, both hands free. Chaos reached him at the second step and pressed against his left leg without a sound, and Monroe's hand dropped to the dog's neck without looking down, finding the exact spot, and for just a moment, his eyes closed. 1 breath. Then he opened them, and his voice changed entirely. 12 o'clock. 22 feet. That one? Nobody asked him. He just said it. Low, flat, final, and Chaos was already there, nose quartering the air 6 inches off the ground, body angled not toward the culvert mouth itself, but toward a seam in the earth 3 feet to the left of it, where the drainage grade funneled the underground current. Monroe had not moved fast. He didn't need to. He walked to the back boundary fence the way water finds a channel, no wasted angle, no hesitation, and he crouched at the wire without touching it and watched the dog for 4 seconds. Just watched. The facility workers were clustered at the back gate, talking over each other. Someone had a phone. Someone else was calling for a flashlight. Thomas Nyberg had followed, tablet still in hand, though he'd stopped looking at it. Monroe wasn't looking at any of them. There were 3 culvert openings visible from the fence line. The leftmost one had a rusted grate that hadn't moved this season. The weed growth at its base was unbroken. The middle one was the obvious choice. It was the widest, and 2 of the staff had already started toward it. Monroe tracked the air. There was a wet mineral smell rolling off the slope, groundwater smell, and under it something else. Warm carbon dioxide. Faint, the kind a small body produces in an enclosed space over 20-25 minutes. He found it, by the way. Chaos's nose pulled left. Not toward the middle. Not even toward the culvert mouth, he'd called. Not that one, he said, without raising his voice. The 2 staff members stopped. He pointed to a narrower opening set back into the embankment, half obscured by blackberry growth, with a slight depression in the mud at its threshold. Recent. 8 inches of depression, the right weight, the right drag pattern. For a child moving on hands and knees, he unlatched the gate himself. His fingers found the mechanism without fumbling, without searching, the type of latch he'd cataloged it 2 minutes ago when he first read the fence line. He went through, and chaos came to him in a way that was not the frantic charge of reunion, and not the cautious approach of a dog uncertain about a stranger. It was a return. The dog's shoulder pressed against Monroe's left knee as he crouched, and Monroe's hand went to the back of Chaos's neck. With the same automatic precision, he turned the pipe, not thinking, not deciding, just returning to the only grip his hand had ever fully known. He leaned close to the dog's ear. 2 words. Nobody caught them. Chaos went in. Monroe stayed at the entrance, crouched, one hand resting on the ground beside the opening. He was reading the air from the outside now. The pressure change as chaos moved through it, the way sound traveled back along the pipe, the slight updraft that meant the culvert had a secondary outlet and the child wasn't against a dead end. Clifford Pedway crouched beside him without being invited. The 2 men said nothing for a while. 40 seconds. 50. Then from somewhere, deep in the earthwork, a sound. Small and muffled and, unmistakably, a child's voice. And then Chaos's alert bark. Once, sharp, disciplined. A bark Monroe had heard in 4 countries in the dark. "She's alive," Monroe said. Not to anyone, just said it. He leaned to the opening and spoke again in that low, precise voice. Not louder, not urgent, just carrying, and gave the child a single instruction, the same way he'd given Chaos 2 words, conserving everything except clarity. 2 minutes and 40 seconds later, a 6-year-old girl with mud on her elbows came out of the culvert on her knees, blinking. Chaos emerged behind her and sat, waiting. Monroe was there when she came out. He caught her under the arms without standing up, and he held her steady until someone else could take her weight. Nobody moved for a while. The child's mother had her now, both of them on the ground 10 feet away, the mother making sounds that weren't words anymore. A couple of staff stood at the edge of the culvert entrance, not quite sure where to look. Clifford Pedway had stepped back against the fence, arms loose, giving the yard its space. Chaos had not moved from Monroe's side. The dog lay down slowly, the way old working dogs do, not collapsing, just deciding, and set his head across Monroe's thigh. Monroe's right hand found the back of the dog's skull without looking. His thumbs settled behind the ear. The rotation that usually belonged to the pipe was gone. Now his hands were finally completely at rest. Thomas Nyberg stood maybe 12 feet off. His tablet was at his side. He'd started a sentence when Monroe first sat down in the dirt, something beginning with "I just want to say," and the sentence had not gone anywhere. He hadn't moved. He wasn't writing. One of the younger staff members, a woman who'd been with the facility 3 years, crouched near Monroe and kept her voice low. "I have to ask," she said. "We've had his file flagged. No consistent visitors, no handler contact. It's been 2 years. She wasn't accusing him of anything. She just needed to understand. Why didn't you come? Monroe did not answer right away. His thumb moved once behind Chaos's ear, and the dog pressed up slightly into the pressure. Eyes half closed. I didn't want him to think I was coming to take him somewhere. The woman looked at him. Monroe's eyes stayed on the dog. He did 4 deployments, Monroe said. Every time I showed up with a kit bag in the lead, it meant something hard was next, something underground, something that got loud before it got quiet. He exhaled slowly through his nose. He doesn't know what retirement means. He knows what I mean when I walk through a gate toward him. And I wasn't going to let him spend however many good years he had left watching the entrance every day, waiting for a mission that wasn't coming. The woman didn't say anything. He earned the quiet, Monroe said. I wasn't going to take it from him just because I missed him. That was all. He didn't dress it up. Chaos shifted his weight and pressed his nose briefly against Monroe's wrist, not alerting, not working, just acknowledging. Monroe let his hand rest there across the dog's flank and looked out toward the culvert where the sound of the child's crying had already faded under the mother's voice. Behind him, Thomas Nyberg set the tablet down against the fence post. Not on a surface, not with purpose, just set it down and did not pick it back up. He stood there for the full length of it. He watched Monroe's hand on the dog. He watched the way Chaos breathed, slow and even, the ribcage moving like something no longer braced for what came next. At some point, the staff filtered back toward the main building. The mother carried her daughter toward the parking lot. Clifford Petway lingered by the gate, met Monroe's eyes, once from across the yard, gave a single nod, and left. Monroe sat in the dirt with the dog's weight across his legs and did not get up. The yard went quiet. The late afternoon pressed down, gray and still, the kind of cold that doesn't threaten anything anymore, just settles. Thomas Nyberg was the last one standing there, not because anyone asked him to stay, he just hadn't figured out how to leave yet. He looked at the kennel, at the man in the worn plaid flannel sitting in the mud, at the dog who had finally, after 2 years, stopped watching the gate. He didn't write anything down. Monroe's truck pulled out of the lot slow, the way he'd arrived. No hurry, no ceremony. Just the sound of gravel under tires giving way to asphalt. Chaos was at the fence before the engine noise fully settled. Not agitated, not pacing, just there, nose through the chain link, watching the truck find the 2-lane road and straighten out. It moved away the way everything flat and true moves away. Smaller by degrees, the faded color of it bleeding into the distance until the tree line took it. Chaos watched until it was gone. Then he turned back to the yard, not searching, not distressed, the way a dog turns back to a place it belongs when it knows the other place hasn't forgotten it either. There are people like Monroe in every waiting room, every parking lot, every line you've ever stood in, wearing something worn, carrying something they never explain, having already paid something you'll never be told about. The pipe was never lit, the visits were never made, the silence was never mistaken for indifference, not by the one who mattered. That's what it looks like. Loving something enough to stay away from it. That quiet, that cost, that's the whole thing.